Hello, in this video we will see how to create simple collisions for Enfusion Engine tools using the Arma Reforger Tools. Remember to watch the previous video if you don't know how to place assets or haven't synced Blender in Enfusion Workbench. It's an introduction to these tools. First of all, we will open Enfusion Workbench in Blender and make sure they are synchronized. This is the project from the last video. If you watched the last video, you will already have this project created. Now we'll open Blender. I've already created a Blender project with the previous asset so I can have everything set up to sync with the workbench, XOB file, and make changes. This is the project asset. Remember that the Enfusion Blender Tools menu opens with the N key on your keyboard. This is generally how you view the plugins installed in Blender. My XOB file is already with its path ready for synchronization between both softwares, as it is a Blender project that I saved with everything already configured. That's why when you click Open XOB in Workbench, from Blender Enfusion Tools, the file opens in Workbench. Sync is working properly. Now let's focus on collisions. In the Workbench with the asset open, on the right, we can see a section that says Colliders. It currently has a value of 0 because there are no colliders. If there were, it would show a value greater than 0. Our goal will be to create these colliders with Blender and transfer them to Enfusion Workbench so that we have collisions in the assets. To create collisions, you have to take into account a little theory. The colliders are created with geometries, and each geometry has its own prefix that must be associated with the asset's mesh. If those prefixes are not used, Enfusion Workbench will not interpret the mesh as a collider and will do so as a mesh. These are the prefixes for the geometries used by Enfusion Workbench. Other engines like Unreal Engine also use them and are necessary for the engine to recognize the element as a collision. This information is on the official Enfusion Tools wiki. All links will be in the comments or in the video description. These prefixes are essential and mandatory, and we must make good use of them for the colliders to work. The first example I'm going to create is with a box, so we'll use the UBX_ prefix. In Blender, we can create a mesh, and simply changing the object prefix will turn it into a collider. Now we adjust the mesh to our asset so that it fits perfectly. This is a handcrafted process, and it's up to us to adjust the most efficient geometry that best fits the asset. I've already adjusted the mesh for future collisions for the asset mesh. I did this very quickly. It's just an example so you can see how it works in a basic way. First, I want you to see that if I don't add the UBX prefix to the mesh, the asset will be transferred as just another mesh. As you can see, it has only been transferred as a mesh, and no collider has been added at any time. Now we will add the UBX_ prefix to the mesh, and it will become a collider. In addition to the prefix, you must add the name of the asset mesh. This way you'll know that the collider corresponds to a specific mesh, since you could have several meshes within a project with several colliders. If you've noticed, under Material Tools, the Collider Setup panel has become accessible. But when selecting the asset mesh, it is no longer present. That's because the mesh doesn't have the prefix to be detected as a collider. Now we're going to transfer the mesh converted into a collider to Enfusion Workbench, so you can see the collider being transferred. This message is because the previous mesh is no longer there. Instead, we now have a collider that is not visible but fits the mesh. If I delete the collider in Blender and export it to Workbench, the collider will be deleted in Workbench as well. But if I redo it and export it again, the collider will appear again in the Workbench. It's the magic of synchronization between Blender and Enfusion Workbench. Now we'll place the asset on a map. To do this, we'll open the World Editor. If you don't know how to open a map or create a project, you should watch the video before this one, which explains the basics of importing assets and opening maps. We'd already imported our XOB into the map, so there we have it. The problem is that collisions won't work in this case, as we have to activate them. No collisions or decals. The bullet shot effects marked on the asset, so let's add them. Select the asset. At the bottom of the right panel, click Add Component. In the component list, type Rigid Body and select it with a double click. This Rigid Body component gives properties to the asset's physics, taking the colliders as a reference. In the Rigid Body options, make sure the Model Geometry option is activated. This option is what activates collisions. Now we enter Player Mode and test if the collisions work. As you can see, the collisions work, and the character even executes the animation to climb onto the asset from the edge. Now we'll see if collisions also work with shot decals, if the shot effects are marked in the asset. Effectively, the shots are more or less marked in the asset. If they are not well marked somewhere, it is a matter of adjusting the geometry of the collider in Blender and transferring it back to Enfusion. This is the basics of creating collisions in Blender and transferring them to Enfusion. Just a simple explanation of how, with a mesh box, we have managed to transfer collisions to an asset and make them work. And indeed, our collision did not mark the bullets well on the asset because the collision was poorly placed in that area. To improve the creation of collisions, I am going to recommend a free plugin for Blender that will help you to generate collisions for your assets. The plugin is called Simple Collider and can be downloaded for free from GitHub. I will leave the links in the comments of the video. Simply go to Releases and download the latest version of the plugin. It is a zip file. Once downloaded, go to Blender. Remember that the N key opens the plugins. In this case, it is not yet installed. In the Edit tab, go to Preferences, and in the Add-ons section, install the plugin by selecting the zip file you downloaded called Simple Collider. Select Install from Disk. As you can see, the plugin now appears in the Plugins panel. That means it has been installed and activated. In case it does not appear, make sure that it appears in the Add-ons panel and that its checkbox is checked. This is the plugin menu with its options. I will also leave you the direct link to its user manual, where everything is explained how it works, if you want to learn more about this tool and know how to use it well. Remember the prefix type for each type of collider geometry. Enfusion only works with these prefixes. It does not work with others. This is the graphical user interface of Simple Collider. Remember to review the basic functions and what it is for. With operator settings, we can alter the shape of the geometry and its polygons. To generate colliders with the Simple Collider tool, we have to select the reference asset for which we want to generate them, and the options will be available. When generating a shape, it will automatically generate the collision that corresponds to the geometry by adding the corresponding prefix, in this case UBX for a box. For the cylinder has generated a UCX prefix. Also for the convex shape. For the sphere, we generate a USB prefix. Mesh simply adds a mesh without a prefix. Therefore, it does not act as a collider, but it can serve as a reference for creating it. The capsule is generated with a UCP prefix. The problem is that it is wrong here, since Enfusion does not accept UCP prefix for capsules. Instead, we have to use the UCS prefix. We will test exporting from Blender to see what happens. Indeed, the collision that was there has disappeared because instead of transferring the capsule collision, it has simply been transferred as a mesh. But if we put the correct UCS prefix, you will see how the capsule disappears and is transferred as a capsule collider. The message informs us that the old capsule-shaped mesh has disappeared from the workbench, but the capsule collider has also been injected. This is why prefixes are so important, and why a small thing can make all the difference. If I delete the capsule and sync, the collider disappears. If I inject it again, it reappears. So the UCS prefix works correctly with Enfusion with capsule geometry. Now let's go to the map to see if the collision actually works. We won't need to create a rigid body because we're working on the same asset. It's already created, so the rigid body we applied a few minutes ago will also be applied to the capsule. Indeed, even though the capsule is not visible, there is a collision that prevents me from accessing the asset that is visible. It is the collision of the capsule that prevents me from reaching that point. Right now, I'm above the phantom collision of the capsule, so I'm floating in the air. We can remesh the mesh. In the operator settings panel, we can modify the geometry parameters. To do this, simply press the parameter key and move the mouse left or right, and the mesh will be modified. change the ratio, I will now press the D key and move the mouse from left to right. This tool can also be used to create different LODs for our assets with simpler geometry, so we can improve optimization within the game. As we move away from an object, we will make it have a simpler geometry instead of maintaining a complex geometry at long distances. The tool also allows us to generate a box geometry similar to that of our mesh, so it would automatically adjust more or less. We will have to adjust it with our skill. If we click on the collider in Workbench, we'll see how it appears in Enfusion. The yellow part is the collider. We can also make an auto-convex mesh and even divide it into parts. If we export it, we will see that the mesh has many collisions. We can also change the prefixes automatically by clicking on the box corresponding to each form. This is another free tool that allows us to create colliders. Remember that the links are in the comments or in the video description. The plugin is installed in Blender like all the others. In case it doesn't install, I'll show you how to fix it. For me, it wasn't installed from the file itself. Go into the file code and copy the whole thing. It's just text. You can edit the file with a text editor. Simply delete everything inside and paste what you copied. Save the file before closing it so that the changes take effect. You can also create a text file, paste the copied text, and then save the file as a .py file. Now you can install either of the two files. The plugin should install correctly. It has been installed, as it appears in the plugins panel. In the colliders section, we can do something similar to the other plugin. We can generate geometric shapes. But without a doubt, my favorite part is the Mesh Collider option. We can simplify the geometry until we achieve a convex appearance. the mesh with the convex prefix of UCX so that it is assimilated by Enfusion as a collision. The time has come to export, and we've obtained a nearly perfect collider. Let's see how the decals behave on your surface. It's almost perfect. And that's it, guys. This is how you can create simple collisions, taking into account the prefixes that Enfusion supports. This geometry fits the asset's mesh much better. Remember that the collision geometry must be simple and basic, otherwise you'll get an error when importing it. Its shape must match the prefix to avoid errors. Now our asset already has collision and bullet impacts. I forgot to say that when we create collisions, we can assign predefined materials and predefined properties. If the video was helpful to you, don't forget to leave a comment of thanks. It's always nice to know that something has been helpful to you, and it's nice to read people's comments. I hope you have a nice day. See you in another video.